All right, hello again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. We've been going over Web Development and Design Foundations with HTML 7th edition by Terry Phelps Morris. And we're up to Chapter 4, which starts in our book on page 133 and is entitled Visual Elements and Graphics. Notice we have several objectives here. Create and format lines and borders on web pages. Apply the image element to add graphics to web pages. Optimize an image for web page display. Configure images as backgrounds on web pages. Configure images as hyperlinks. Configure visual effects with CSS3, which is the newest version of CSS, or cascading style sheets. And that'll include multiple background images, rounded corners, box shadow, text shadow, opacity, and gradients. Configure RGBA, which is red, green, blue with alpha, and HSLA, which is hue, saturation, and light with alpha, color with CSS3. Use HTML5 elements to caption a figure. Use the HTML5 meter and progress elements. Find free and fee-based graphic sources, and follow recommended web design guidelines for graphics on web pages. Let's face it, the reason that some people go to websites, or one of the reasons that people go to websites, are, the graphics pull them in. So this chapter introduces you to working with different kind of visual elements, mainly a lot of graphic types of stuff. When you include images on a website, remember, not all people are going to be able to view them. If somebody is sight impaired, whether they're legally blind, totally blind, whatever it is, all right? And also visitors, who are using a mobile device, either you might have it so that your images don't show, or most of your images don't show with a mobile device, all right, or whatever. All right, so first let's talk a little bit about configuring lines and borders. And this is about the simplest example. So let's go in. We've done this before. And I'm going to grab my Chapter 2, which was the easiest one that I had here. Copy. And we'll make a Chapter 4 folder. And we'll drop that file in. Open it up in Notepad, and the only thing I want to do, all right, just so you see this, what I'm going to do is at the end of each one of these headers here, I'm going to put in what's called a horizontal rule. All right, I'm going to put one in literally at the end of each one of these. It's a little overkill, but just so you can see exactly what's going on. And we'll leave everything else in there. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, but that's okay. So let's run it. Should be pretty obvious what those HR horizontal rules are doing. All right, they're putting a divide in here. Now, by default, as you can see, they take up 100% of the screen. They don't have to. So you can switch that out so they don't take up 100%. But quite often, that's what's going to happen. Jump back into Chapter 4. There we go. All right. So there's the example right there too in your book. All right. CSS Border property. All right, as it says, it configures a border on the top, on the right, on the bottom, and on the left-hand side. Consists of all that stuff that you see there. This is an interesting slide because it shows you a couple things. If you want to, you can use what's called a shortcut for a border. So notice we have the width, we have the style, and we have the color all together. This could have been done, instead of doing it like this, we could have said H2 and then the curly brace. Then we could have said border width, colon, 2 pixels, semicolon. Next line, border style, colon, solid, semicolon. Then the next line, we could have said border color, colon, pound FF0000. All right, this is much crisper, much neater, as you can see. And if we grab this one, whoops, I don't want to do that. I want to grab this. And for now, even though this is not good practice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, I don't need all these horizontal rules. But let's put one after the first and one after the second, and we'll get rid of all the rest of these. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get rid of all those. And I'm going to take and comment out all of the stuff for the rest of basically everything else that's in here. There. All right, so hopefully that did everything. I'll find out real quickly, because if I come back here now, there we go. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into here. And again, this is not good practice to do it this way, but I'm going to put in style tags. And I'm going to paste in what the author had put right there. So think about what this means. All right, sometimes I like to actually put this on the same page, because I don't have to leave the page and you can pretty much tell what's going to happen. What this says is if I get an H2 tag, it should have a border around it. That border should be 2 pixels wide. That border should be solid, and that border should be red. So if I save that and come back here and refresh, again, it's pretty obvious what has just happened there. And there's a lot of different ways that we can change this, just so you see some of it, okay? For example, if I change it from 2 to 10, it's going to get much thicker, as you'd probably imagine. And instead of solid, I can have, for example, dashed. So let's see what that does. You see it's much thicker, and it's now dashed. Makes it hard to read, but you get the idea. I could be wrong here. I think there's like dotted. There's a bunch of these. Dotted may be wrong, so if it doesn't show anything, I put the wrong thing in there. Yep, that's correct. All right. And again, if you think that's a little bit too much, we can just cut down the width. So we can cut it back down. Let's cut it to 4. And you can see the difference. All right. Just a couple of really simple examples right there. Now, we've talked before about block elements and about inline elements. Remember that a block element is, by default, it has a line before it and it has a line after it. An inline element does not have a line before it and a line after it. So we've already seen this one right here. You've already seen this one where we put, so let's add this one, which is also going to add to our hyperlink. Okay. So we'll come back to here and we'll literally just add that right there. Again, there's no standard that people use. You can see how I set my CSS up. Other people might think that I'm being, I'm putting way too many blank lines, etc. in there. I like having everything kind of broken like that where you can see what's going on. We'll set this back and we'll make this solid. So these two will be the same. All right. Now I'll leave my H2 tag in there. But let's get rid of all the tags that come after the H2 tag. We really don't need those. So we'll get rid of all those. And I'll tell you what else I'm going to do. I'm going to take the first paragraph that we have here, and I'm going to uncomment it, just the first paragraph. All right. And I'm going to put a hyperlink in here. So, href equals www.rankin.edu. We'll put in this by this nom here. I don't even know what that is. All right, so we'll leave it like that. So you can see we've added right here, we've added a hyperlink. There it is. This is what will be underlined. Okay, so let's go back to here and let's see what we've done. This is what I'm trying to get across to you. Since the H2 tag is a block level, it draws a border around the entire line. But since the A tag is not a block level element, it's an inline element, it only draws it around the actual word itself. Notice this will get us to, it probably needs the HTTP. Let's double check that. And there you go. All right. So there's a lot of very interesting effects that you can get using this stuff. And that's more than anything else, that's the point to get across here. So here are some of the ones. I guess I should have gone on to show you those. So notice you can use the default. You can have a double, ridged, dashed, dotted, etc. And they're going to look a little bit different depending on the browser in which you run them in. If you decide that you don't want an entire border like that, now think about the difference here. Here we're saying just give me that border on the bottom. So for instance, with what we had here before, if we were to just change that to border bottom, the line here, the line here, and the line on the top, and that's border top, border left, and border right, those would all go away. So if I come back to here and change that from border to border bottom, just make that one change. So we change it from border to border bottom and run it again, you can see the difference. All right, and I do want you to see this too, that when I do set this up like this, so we'll do all that different stuff in there, but we'll come back in here also and say, I think it's border width, but I could be wrong on here. No, that's not going to work. Border bottom, 2 pixel. I think we have to say this is a separate one. So border width. Let's make it, for example, 40%, because then you'll really see it because we're knocking it down. In fact, let's make it 30%. So now we're knocking 70% off of that border. And it didn't like that. I thought you could use, that is right. But I thought that you could use, literally put widths in there. Top and bottom left border, thicks, etc., etc. Set the width of all 4 borders. Huh. Well, there is a way to do it, and let's just go on because we may find it as we go on. And if we don't, then I'm responsible for finding it for you. All right. The padding property, as it says, it configures the empty space between the content and the border itself. So here, with that 5 pixels, what it's saying is put some border there, there, and there. But notice with no padding, how it's basically all kind of pushed together. All right, and sometimes the best way to see that is to pretty much change it grossly. So in other words, I'm going to put in your padding 25 pixels. All right. Okay, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's been really pushed down now. In fact, let's go back and let's make 2 changes. First of all, I'm going to take this line out for a second. All right, but instead of border bottom, we're going to just put the whole border back again. All right, just so you see the whole border all the way around. There we go. And now when we go back and we re-add that padding. Now you really start to see the difference. All right. Okay. You can set padding like I did, which set it for the entire element, which was just padding, or you can set bottom padding and or padding bottom and or padding left and or padding right and or padding top. Now padding top and bottom become especially important. Well, I guess all of them do. But for example, let's take it from the top, no pun intended, but there, putting some padding on the top, sometimes you've got it where you're pushed right up to the top of the screen. So you might put some padding top on there, or the bottom of the screen. And with the left and the right, you might be pushed way against the left or right hand side of the machine. So you might put that in there. I've talked to you about this shorthand before, and I showed it in the guise of margins before. This one right here, padding 20 pixels, 10 pixels. Since there's only 2 and there's 4 possibilities, the 20 will take care of top and bottom, and the 10 will take care of left and right. That's what they're saying right here. See, they've got the width here is just 250 pixels. All right. So it works the same way for padding as it does for margin. Let's try that though. I'm going to come back here. Instead of padding right here, we're going to put width. We'll just put here 55 pixels. Okay. No special significance to that number. All right. Well, you can see now I made it too small, so let's make it. Well, we can more than double that. Let's triple that. So let's make it 165 pixels. There you go. It's looking a little better. Let's bump it up to about 200. Still isn't enough room right there, so let's make it 225, and that probably will do it. And there you can see it. Okay? So it was just width where I was trying to use border width, and that was what the problem was previously. So they have some practice in here, and again, I would strongly urge you to take the time to key all this stuff in. You may have all of the files that you need with all the completed projects, but the way to learn is to key stuff in. You'll naturally make some mistakes. We all do. I've made some already in this lecture. So you'll see that and come in and try changing that. So try to flip these around. Put the Times New Roman first and then the Georgia, just to see how it looks different on here. Change the color for the font. Change the color for the background. Change the border. Instead of 2 pixels dash, make it 4 pixels, or try to make it dotted or whatever. Change the color of that. Change the text alignment. Do all that stuff. That's how you really learn. Okay. All right, let's switch here and start talking a little bit about graphics. So if you're following along in the book, we're all the way up to page 140. And there's 3 basic types of graphics that get used. And as you can see here, they go by their names, which are GIFs, JPEGs, and PNGs. Okay? And that kind of shows you the chronology too, because for a while, about all you could use was GIFs. They have less colors. I think there's only 256 colors you can use with GIFs. GIFs work fine for things like logos or things that don't, non-photographs, things like that. JPEGs are much more intricate. So in other words, you typically use those for photos and things like that. All right? And Ping is sort of a hybrid that tries to bring together the best of GIFs and JPEGs. Kind of keep those in mind as we get started. All right, so here's some, again, GIF is an acronym that stands for Graphics Interchange Format. Again, best used for line art, logo, things that aren't really that intricate. You can only work with 256 colors. Notice the difference between using transparency where it shows through and not using transparency. All right, you can animate GIFs, and they're really good for very simplistic animations. They use lossless compression, which means as you change the size, etc. of a GIF, okay, with some file types, when you start to change the size of the file will change dramatically. Not so much with a GIF. So the lossless compression there is used when the GIF is saved. It means that nothing in the original image is lost. All right. And when you render, the browser renders the compressed image, it'll have the same pixels as the original did. You can also use something in here that's called interlacing. And look at it this way. Maybe you've gone out to a website at one time, and when you first brought the site up, you see almost a little bit like a ghost or a shadow type of an image. And what it is you've got some very intricate image that's going to be loaded. And it hasn't started to load yet, but what the system has done with interlacing is it displays what the size of that image is. So the interlaced image will progressively display, and it almost looks like it fades in as it downloads. It'll go from kind of fuzzy to clearer and sharper, etc. JPEGs, another acronym for Joint Photographic Expert Group. All right, again, they're best used for photographs. They can contain up to 16.7 million colors. Notice they have a lossy compression. And what that means is that some of the pixels in the original file might be lost or removed when you compress the file. So as you change the size of the original, the color may look a little bit different. You cannot animate with JPEGs rather. You cannot take JPEGs and make them transparent. You can have what's called a progressive JPEG, which again, as it says, is similar to what we talked about with interlacing in the GIFs just a minute ago. All right. Finally, there are pings. And ping, again, attempts to combine the best of GIFs and JPEGs. It's another acronym. It stands for Portable Network Graphic, and I should mention, sometimes when you save a JPEG file, it'll get saved as a .jpeg, sometimes as a .jpg, but they're both JPEGs. All right. Like JPEGs, pings they support millions of colors. They support different levels of transparency. They do support interlacing like GIFs. Like GIFs, they have a lossless compression. So as time is going on, the support for these is getting better and better. All right, they also do mention there's a graphic on the bottom, table 4.2 on the bottom of page 142 that shows all this stuff that we just mentioned. And the author mentions on the very bottom of page 142 and the top of page 143 that Google has a new WebP format that offers improved lossy compression for photographic images, but it's not ready for use yet in commercial websites. And it's actually pronounced WebP. All right. Currently, it's only supported by Chrome. So, all right, let's talk about images. And you can look at that example that's right there. And it shows you the main things, the main components of an image. Images are added via an image tag. There are two things that are considered mandatory today. It used to be the only thing that was mandatory was the source tag, because that's the actual source of where the image is. All right? But today, because so many people who go out on the web are sight impaired, we put an alt tag in there. All right? so that if someone is sight impaired, what they'll do is through their speaker on their browser, they'll hear dog at computer. When you go in and add a height and you add a width, you make it that much easier for the browser to figure out how much room to put aside for this. So notice, if I grab that image tag right there, which is what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy to the clipboard. I'm going to go back here to what we've been doing, and I'm going to actually paste it in here, even before the our H tags. So there's dog. I'm just going to, you can put these on different lines. I like to do that so that it literally stands out. And the reason I'm getting these kind of funny squigglies here is because I'm copying in from a binary format and not from a textual format. All right, it's copying it in from PowerPoint, so it's adding the weird curlies on there. Now, right now, if I do this, it's not going to show because I don't have that saved, dog.jpg. So again, you'll see this if I do a run. Well, let's just refresh it here. Okay, but it does show me my alt tag, dog at computer. See that? All right, but now I'm going to come back to here, and I'm going to grab that graphic, and I will, let's see, copy. Don't know if this will work okay or not. We're going to find out right now. And I'll paste. That's not going to take that. Darn it. I'm not all that great at copying from PowerPoint to someplace else. Let's do this. Let's go here and let's go to Google. All right, and we'll go to images, and I'll put in dog picture 100 by 100, and there's a 100 by 100 dog picture. It's not at a computer, but you get the idea. So I'm going to save the image as, it is a JPEG, so we'll save it to our desktop, our Chapter 4 folder, and I will call this dog.jpg. All right, I have it in there now, but what I want to do is that alt tag now really isn't true anymore. It's not dog at computer. We'll just change it to dog yawning. Okay. Now, sometimes when you save this too, it may seem to be like it's going to be 100 by 100, but notice it's really 80 by 80. All right, so a little bit of shrinkage has taken place when I did that. Now, I can keep that at 100 by 100, and it will work. But that's not really the true size. The true size is really 80 by 80. All right, so I should actually come back in here and change this to 80 by 80. And how did I know that that was 80 by 80? First, let's shrink that down. Notice, boom, it's got a little smaller. All right, how did I know that was 80 by 80? If you did not notice it, the way that I found out is I took my mouse and literally clicked on it. Then down here it said dimensions 80 by 80. All right. Again, notice what's required. The alt attribute, all right, and it says not the file name of the image, but yeah, you would put the file name in there into the source. Now notice if you've got a decorative image. So in other words, maybe you have like a little curly kind of design or something that's on there that it other than for aesthetic reasons, it really adds nothing to the site, and it would mean nothing to a person who's sight impaired. That's when you can use an alt equals and then put an empty string in there, double quote, double quote. Recommended. If your site uses image links for the main navigation, provide simple text links at the bottom of the page. So what they're saying is if you've got a website with multiple pages, and what you decide you're going to do is rather than having links someplace, regular hyperlink type of things, to go from page to page, instead if you want the user to click on images, you should provide something at the bottom of the page that just has text and doesn't have images in it. And that'll help people, again, who are sight impaired. You can create, as they mentioned there, you can create an image link. All right. So if I wanted to be able to have something along the lines of this, all right, where I want to be able to click here, and when I click it, it went back to the home page. All right, then the image, home.gif, is this. The height is 19. The width is 85. The alt means just got home page. Notice that by default, browsers will automatically add a border to this. So if you want to remove that, you say image border style none, which gets rid of it. Thumbnails are also popular. Maybe you've seen websites where you might have a whole bunch of thumbnails, all right, which are just smaller versions of a picture, and you click the smaller version and the bigger version appears. So again, they define a thumbnail image as a small image configured to link to a larger version of that same image. Very important slide right here. They mention that the process of creating an image with the lowest file size that still renders with good quality is a balancing act. And what they mean by that is if you've got too many images and they're too intricate and they're too big, it might take a while for them to load. The average person will wait no longer than about 5 seconds for a web page to load. And if it hasn't loaded by then, they think there's a problem. They're either going to try to refresh the page, or they're going to just leave and go to another page. Well, if the basis for your website is to sell a service and they leave, well, now you've just potentially lost money. Notice photographs taken with digital cameras are not usually optimized for the web. All right? So there are several different kinds of image optimizations that you can use. The one that's in here that I would recommend is GIMP, G-I-M-P. I've used it before. And one of the things that it allows you to do is to take an existing image and save it to another size with typically very little loss in quality. Okay? When you are choosing names for your image files, these are all recommendations, but they all pretty much do stand true. Use all lowercase letters. Don't use any punctuation. Don't change the file extension. Well, it's saved as a GIF, but I want it to be a JPEG, so I'm just going to change it from .gif to .jpeg. If you want to change the file type from a GIF to a JPEG, go into Google and find like a GIF to JPEG converter. Okay? Keep your file names short, but make them descriptive. As it says, il.gif is too short. My image with my dog on my birthday.gif is too long. Dog B-Day, pretty good. Now, what we have not done, which we'll start doing right now, is what they show here, and that is, if we take a look at what we have here, we've got our dog picture and we've got our index. But normally when you've got images, you might have several of them. So you create a folder called images. And if I did that too fast, all I did was I clicked with the right mouse button inside of here. It's brought up this context menu. I chose new with the left mouse button and folder. And I typed in images right there. Now I'm going to take my dog image and I'm going to drag it into that folder. So I'm going to move it there. Now notice what happens on here when I do that. The dog image goes away because it's changed to dog yawning, which is what we changed it to. But what we have to do now is we have to go back into here, and where our source is, we have to tell it it's in the images folder /dog.jpg. So I made that change, and as soon as I do and I refresh, there's my dog back again. If I did that too fast, we're going to be doing lots of that as time goes on. And that's again what they're showing right here. Images /. We're coding the path as they mentioned right there. All right, what you can also do when you start working with this stuff is you can put a figure around it. Figure tags, that's what's recommended. As it says, a figure element contains a unit of content that's self-contained, such as an image along with an optional fig caption element. So let's put that in. So let's come back into here. I'm going to tab. This is going to be tabbed around a little bit, but my dog yawning. It's not my dog, but I'm just going to put that in there just so you can see what it's going to look like. And we'll enter our figure tag. All right. So let's see how different this does or does not look. You see what it looks like. Now I will refresh. Moved it over a little bit, and it's got the caption underneath it as well. Now, again, it's not mandatory that you do that, but the figure and fig caption tags are something new for HTML5, and it's more or less recommended that you use it. If you notice the example that's shown here, there's their figure tag. And it's kind of hard to tell, but they did put a caption underneath it too. It says Island Lighthouse built in 1870. So that text you see right there is what appears down here. All right, some of the rest of the stuff that's discussed in the rest of the chapter here. So the image stuff was pages 143, 144, 145, 146, 147, 148, 149. So we're down to page, or up to page 150. Now we're talking about this meter element. Again, it displays a visual gauge of a numeric value, and it has to be within some kind of a known range. And again, you might have it as they show right here, maybe as part of a bar chart or something like that. And when this textbook was written, all right, the meter element was not supported in Internet Explorer. And this is good because it allows us to go back to the site that we talked about earlier, which is caniuse.com. All right, it's an HTML5, and well, hopefully it's in here. Let's see. Meter. There we go. Meter element. So now, as you notice, it's still not supported in IE8, IE9, etc. It still is not supported. But if you go to Edge, it is supported. Notice that Safari still does not support it. All right. Opera Mini does not support it. And Android browsers versions before 4.3 do not support it. Again, this Can I Use is a really wonderful site for you to go out to if you want to see if a browser does or does not support something. All right. So notice what we have in here now. We put a value in there. We put a minimum and a maximum. And you notice the maximum for each of these is 14,417. That means that these bars are going to be the exact same size. All right, and then we can compare these, and ideally, if we add up all the ones underneath the first one, they will equal the 14,417. People like graphics, let's face it. Here's another one, the progress bar. It displays a bar that depicts a numeric value, again, within a range. So it shows you how far you've come. Sometimes what people like to see is basically possibly like as they're downloading some software. You know, you might show something like that that says that you're half done or whatever it happens to be. All right. Background images. Bottom of page 151 in your textbook. You use the CSS background image property to configure a background image. All right, it's kind of hard to tell when you look right here, but what they have is there literally is a background here. By default, images, tile, or repeat. And I'm going to show you an example. This is going to be a god-awful looking example, but I'm going to show you this right now. Again, I'm going to go out like we did before, and I'm going to put here a smiley. And we'll put in 100 by 100. All right, there's a little smiley face. So let's do a save link, save image as, and I'm going to again save it to my images, and I'm going to call it smiley.jpg. Okay. All right. Again, bear with me because this is going to look really, really ugly. So if I do that, and I come in here and I use this one, which is what I'm going to do. So I've got to come in here into my CSS that's at the top here, and I'm going to add this. It says for my body, I'm going to use a background image, and the URL is going to be images smiley dot, I think it was JPEG, but I'm not sure. All right, so it's going to look like that. If this works, this is going to look very, very ugly. See what it looks like? Okay. By default, when you put an image in there like that, it tiles, which means it takes up as much of the screen as you will let it take up. Notice? All right. Now, if for whatever reason I don't want to do that, I can do a repeat Y, a repeat X, or no repeat. Okay, so it's background repeat. So let's do that. So I'm going to come back in here, background image, and we'll say background, background, repeat. We'll put in first no repeat. I've got to make sure that we put it in there syntactically correct. No dash repeat. And notice the huge difference once we do that. Well, there was none. All right. Background repeat. No repeat. Background repeat. Because I spelled background wrong. So you see how different it looks. Okay, so I can also come in here, rather than doing that, saying no repeat, I can say repeat X. I think that's what it was. Yeah, repeat hyphen X or repeat hyphen Y. So there's repeat X, so it repeats just on the X axis. And if I don't want to do that, I can do a repeat Y to have it repeat on the Y axis. Okay? And sometimes what you want to do, and sometimes the reason that this becomes important, just as an FYI for you, is you might have some kind of an image that doesn't take up the entire screen. So you might find a background that's pretty much the same color as the image and put it in there. So if your image isn't showing, or whatever, that the background, it still looks pretty nice. Again, here's pretty much everything. So you put the image in there, and then you say how you want the repeat to happen or not happen. You can use multiple background images, and this is kind of for what I told you before. Couple more things about images that you might want to be aware of here. So this starts in the book. on page 156. And what the author discusses in here is the first thing is an image map. And rather than me creating one of these, which would be kind of a pain in the butt, I'm going to come in here and put in here, I'm going to go out to Google, and I'm going to type in image map of the US. And looks like here's one. All right. Now, if I go and click on, for example, Missouri, what does it do? All right. Well, in this case, it's not taking me where I'd like it to take me, but I'm sure there's a better example done than the one I just showed you. So click on Missouri, and still not doing a very good job here. But typically what you would have, there you go. Now there's a map of Missouri. So the idea is the map of the United States here is called a hotspot. And when you click on the different parts of it, so if I go over to California and I click, eventually it should bring me up a map of California. All right? Quite often you see image maps set up with things like the United States. I've seen them where you set up an image map for maybe some kind of a medical class where there's a picture of the human body. It's another one that's really popular. So instead of image map of the US, of the human body. All right. And you have this where you've got a person here and you click on the person. So if I want to find out what this is, I click there and it shows me information about, so there's the stomach. So I want to click on the stomach. It's not showing me it, but you get the idea, hopefully. And I'm picking some really bad examples here, I guess. So there's the lymph nodes. I guess this one doesn't work, but again, hopefully you get the idea. All right. So that basically is an image map. Let's talk about that. And favorite icons, or favorites icon, sprites, sources for graphics, guidelines for using images, and accessibility. So there's an example of an image map. And what they've done is they've drawn around this boat here. This is called your hotspot area. All right. So the map element there is used to define your image map. The area is basically what you want to be able to click to make it do something. All right. There's also a shape attribute. And I believe the shapes that are available, there is like a circle, there's a rectangle, and there's a polygon where you can make your own. Now, I'll have to check my stuff, but a long time ago, and I'll do this right now because I'll forget otherwise. I've got an external drive hooked up to my computer right here, and I'm going to check in there. So I'm on the D drive, that's my external one, and I'm going to check. Okay, and it may or may not find anything in there, but I'm going to wait because that's going to take a while because this file has got a lot of stuff on it. But I created an image map years ago for Mount Rushmore, where it's got the presidents on there. Who is that? It's got like Jefferson and Roosevelt and Washington. I don't remember who else. But if you click on any of those presidents, maybe it's Lincoln, I don't remember. But if you click on any of those presidents, it brings up their homepage. So I'll wait and see if it finds that. And if it does, I'll show that to you. All right. A favorites icon, which is typically called a favicon. And if you want to make sure that this favicon that you create, if you want to make sure that it works in IE, call it favicon.ico. It doesn't really matter what you call it in other browsers, but IE expects it to be called that. And what it is it's a little link that you put up here. Sometimes people put their picture in it or whatever. See if, I don't know if Rankin has a favicon or not. So let's look. is no favicon right there. All right, just a little information thing. This website does not supply identity information. Okay, but you can go out to certain sites and they will have a picture for them. Sprites, as I mentioned right here, a sprite is an image file that contains multiple small images. All right, we're going to go into that in a later chapter, so you'll see it there. Now, a couple things. Notice what they say here, sources for graphics. I'm not going to read any of this for you. But some graphics that you can get online are free, and some are not free. All right, one thing you should never, ever do. For instance, let's say I go out here, and I'm going to go out to Rankin's site. Let's say I really, for whatever reason, I really like, that graphic right there. All right, I can probably right mouse click here and choose view page source, and I can probably find that graphic. Okay, but just because I can find it, I shouldn't copy it and put it onto my own site. I shouldn't do that. You should never, ever do that. Okay. All right, I guess those are favicons right there. There's one for Rankin, and there's one for Can I Use. So you do see them there. Okay. All right. But there are a lot of rules regarding graphics, and there's a lot of things you've got to be aware of. As it says, consider image file size and image quality. Consider how long it's going to take to load an image. Just because, I could, for example, where we had that dog picture before. All right. And I'm going to remove that background image that we have right here. I don't need this anymore. In fact, I'll just comment it out. All right, so I'm commenting out all of that stuff that we put in there with a background image. But I could go to that dog image that we had that was right here, and I could change the size to 500 by 500. It's going to look very, for lack of better words, almost out of focus. But just so you see this, see, I can do that. Just because you can do something like that literally does not mean that you should. All right, so you can see the problem with doing that. There's a big resolution problem. If I wanted to make it bigger because I really like that, I should use a package, something like GIMP. All right, and let's see. So I'm going to knock it back from the size that it was back down to 80 by 80. So it looks more realistic. There we go. Now why am I still getting that? I thought I commented that out. Body images. Not sure why I'm still getting that image after I've commented that out, but I am. Images and accessibility. Don't rely on color alone. Remember, again, anywhere between 5 and 10% of the world is colorblind. So make sure you've got a high contrast between the color of your text and the color of your background. Always use alt tags. All right, as we mentioned earlier, if you use navigation image links to move around the page, then make sure you add the equivalent of those on the bottom of the page that are simple text links. Okay. All right. CSS3 rounded corners. So as we're jumping ahead here, I am up to page 162 on the bottom of the page. All right, and the first thing to mention is the stuff that's here pretty much for the rest of the chapter here is all CSS3 stuff. And the reason that is important is it may or may not work on all browsers. As you know, for example, with this right here with the rounded corners. If I want to know if rounded corners work or not, as we did earlier, I can go out to caniuse.com and I can type in rounded corners. All right, we've done this several times now. So I back this up. I'm on Can I Use? So somewhere in here there's going to be rounded corners. There we go, border radius, rounded corners. And you can notice that other than versions before IE8 and before and Opera Mini, pretty much everything else supports now rounded corners. But you may find that some of the rest of the stuff that's discussed in this particular chapter may or may not be supported. So notice there's the rounded corner. So they're saying have an H1. So let's do that. Let's grab that code that's right there. And we'll add that up on the top here. So it's saying our H1, we want a border radius that's 15 pixels. Again, if you don't get it, ideally, after we run this, you will. Huh. Border radius, 15 pixels. Configures the horizontal and vertical radius of the corner. Numeric values can use pixels or they can use ems. All right. One thing I want to do, I'm still not sure, like I said, why I'm still getting this stuff is still printing out, even though that supposedly is. So let me grab that and literally just remove it. And I will put it into a separate file so I still have it. But I'm going to go back to here and save, and I want to go back now and rerun this. Now that's gone good, but it is not showing my border. So as always, when I run into a fix like this, I'll come in and go type in here CSS3 rounded corners, and sooner or later it's going to push me to W3 schools, and there's an example. All right, so we want something that looks like this. So you can see this first one here has got this. So I'm just going to grab what they have here. All right, I'm going to copy it to the clipboard. I want this to work, and I want you to see it in action, so to speak. So for the H1, I'm going to paste that right in here. So I don't want that anymore. For H1, so that says I'm going to have a border radius with a background color, with padding, with a width, with a height. Now this might look real crazy when we see it, but that's not the point. There it is. You see the roundness. That's what I want to get across to you. All right, that's probably twice as high as we need it to be. So if there was a height in there, we could knock the height down from 150 pixels maybe to 80 pixels. And maybe, whoops, not 800. And maybe that'll look a little bit nicer then if we do that. Okay? So you get the idea. If you don't like that color in the background, again, we can change that to whatever we want. So if I wanted just a maybe blue, oh, I used green again, sorry. Blue would be on the end. So that should be 0000 FF. Okay? All right. Again, how many times have you already heard me say this? The best way to learn this, create a simple web page, start copying in stuff from the book, and then change the stuff that's in the book to see what happens. All right? You don't have to round every corner. This is a little strange looking, in my opinion. But again, remember, top, right, bottom, left. Okay? And you can see what they've done here. So you can get very different effects. You can use box shadows. Sometimes you want to use that because, you know, it just, for lack of better words, all right, it looks a little bit nicer to have a shadow around everything. So if I grab this, okay, Okay, whoops. If I grab this wrapper here, I'm going to just grab all of it. And I'm going to come back to here, and I'm going to paste it in. Now, it's not going to do diddly right now because I don't have, remember that thing means I need an ID, and the ID needs to be named wrapper. All right, so what I'm going to do is under my, we'll start it here. We'll just do it around this H1 and H2 tag. All right, so I'm going to put a div in here, and it'll say ID equal wrapper. Again, I never know how this stuff is going to look until I get done with it. So it may or may not be really noticeable. But we'll see. There's that div. Okay. And it's not that. That's an HR tag. So it's this right here. And I think it looks so funky because there already is an HR tag after the H2. So let's get rid of both these HR tags. And it's not very big, all right, but you can see it down here. All right, and again, typically when you use this kind of thing, you use it for effect. There's an opacity, and when you have an opacity of 0, that means it'll be completely transparent, so typically it almost looks invisible. And if you have an opacity of 1, it's totally opaque, so you can see all of it. But in this example, they made it 60% transparent. All right? So there's all sorts of different things that you can do for color and for design. Remember I mentioned before RGB, red, green, blue, and the A is for alpha. So that's that amount between 0 and 1. There it's 70%. You can also use hue, saturation, light in alpha. So there are different ways that you can set up color. The last thing that's of any breadth coverage that is given in this chapter is they talk about gradients. And with gradients, it's another effect that you can use. And with a gradient, which is shown in the book, oh my goodness, on page 178. CSS provides a method to configure colors as a gradient, which is a smooth blending where you go basically from one color to another color. All right? And again, as always, as I've been doing in here, I'm going to come back here to W3 Schools again. All right? And where we had that example, which was here, I'm going to say CSS gradient example. And again, it'll find one in W3 Schools. All right. There's a good example of a gradient. You can see how the color is changing. All right. And they give an example right here, pound grad. So let's grab that. So this is an ID of grad, short for gradient. So let's grab this. We'll keep that wrapper there, but I'm going to, for lack of better words, kind of turn the wrapper off. But we've got grad there. Now, an interesting thing about this, just so you see this, and you will see this again in class or in example after example as we go on, you'll notice this says minus WebKit minus, minus O minus, minus Moz minus. And the idea is this is handled differently for different browsers. So if you've got a browser that doesn't support gradients, the background will be just red. The minus WebKit minus, that's for the WebKit engine, so that's going to be for Safari and for Google Chrome. The minus O, that's for Opera. The minus Moz, that's for Mozilla, which is Firefox. The idea is over time, because different browsers support this differently, but over time, all of these will go away. And they'll be replaced just with this one. But that's not here yet. All right, so I want to take that where we put this wrapper here. I'm gonna get rid of that for right now. Okay, so that's gone now. But what I want to do is I want to, around my whole thing here, from the top, I'm going to say div ID equal grad. So I'm using the gradient right here. And we'll end it right there. Again, never sure exactly how this is going to look until we run it. But you see the coloring. That's a gradient. All right. So you've seen a lot of different examples of a lot of different things in this chapter. The last thing that I want to mention to you, because this is on the bottom of page 178 in the book, is the author talks about the concept of progressive enhancement. All right. When you have progressive enhancement, what it means is that you are, when you set up all of your CSS and the like, you set it up basically for somebody who can do nothing on their browser. Maybe it's really, really old and they don't support anything. Then you keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And this is such an important concept. I think there'll be a Wikipedia in there someplace. There we go. Okay. As it says here, specific CSS techniques. Okay, the strategy is an evolution of the previous web design that said graceful degradation. Progressive enhancement and graceful degradation are pretty much mirror opposites of one another. When you have graceful degradation, what you do is you assume that everyone who is using your web page and your website has all the latest and greatest features. So that's what you do, is you basically set it up so they can do everything. And then, just in case they've got JavaScript turned off or they're an older browser, you degrade downwards. So you start hoping for the best and you work your way down. With progressive enhancement, you do it in the reverse. You assume they have nothing and you work your way up. You're going to see examples of this as we go on in here. I think that's just about it for the chapter. Again, the chapter introduced visual elements and graphics. And we talked about the importance when you use that, the importance of the fact that not everyone is able to see. So you want to make sure that when you're doing that stuff with your graphics, that you keep it available and you give some kind of an alt tag or some kind of an alternative to other people. All right, when I come back in just a couple minutes, we're going to start up on Chapter 5. Chapter 5 starts in your book on page 199, and it's on the concept of web design. So I'll be back with that shortly.